From the moment the Drachnid warships first appeared in human space, everyone knew the war would be brutal. The Drachnid Empire was known for its unstoppable fleets and advanced weaponry. Their soldiers, insectoid in appearance, towered over humans and held centuries of martial tradition. Their technology often surpassed anything the Terran colonies could muster, and their soldiers were rumored to show no mercy. Across the colonies, fear spread like wildfire. The Drachnid had come to subjugate, to strip resources, to prove their dominance over another species, and on the human side, there was little hope of matching their firepower. Yet in the swirl of rumors and dread, certain stories emerged. Whispers of a lone human combat medic who had confounded Drachnid commanders on more than one battlefield. A figure who wore simple body armor marked with a red cross, dashing through rubble and laser fire, administering aid to friend and foe alike. At first it was nothing more than a rumor, an anecdote repeated among desperate Terran soldiers, but soon details solidified, and that medic's name became known. Lieutenant Helena Blair. She arrived on the planet Greenhaven during the second month of the invasion. Greenhaven had once been a scenic colony world famous for its lush forests and pristine lakes. Now it lay in ruin. Drachnid plasma bombardments had turned entire districts into fields of molten slag, and thousands of civilians had fled into makeshift shelters buried beneath the crumbling infrastructure. Human Marines, under-equipped and outnumbered, clung to a ragged perimeter near the main settlement. Each day, Drachnid assault squads tested the lines, pushing forward with lethal precision. Terran casualties climbed alarmingly, and medical staff were in short supply. Helena Blair stepped off the troop transport, the roar of engines echoing across the ruined spaceport. Her arrival was hardly noteworthy at first. Dozens of medics had already come and gone, some killed, some evacuated. She was slight of build, with hair pulled back beneath a standard-issue helmet. She had a calm demeanor that seemed almost incongruous amid the chaos. She moved briskly through the smoke-filled corridors leading away from the landing pads, a large medic's pack bouncing at her side. The soldiers she passed were too exhausted to greet her. All they saw was another hopeful face that might not live to see tomorrow. In less than an hour, Helena encountered her first major crisis. A squad of Terran Marines had taken a direct hit from a Drachnid energy cannon, and the few survivors were pinned under burning debris. An entire section of the settlement had collapsed. Panic spread among the rescuers. The plasma fires threatened to consume everyone trapped if they couldn't be pulled out. She didn't hesitate. Helena called to the closest engineer to help pry aside a hunk of twisted steel, then crawled into the wreckage to reach a mortally wounded sergeant. The man was losing blood at an alarming rate, and the standard Terran medkits were insufficient for the damage. That was when Helena revealed the first sign of her extraordinary methods. She opened a sealed container from her pack, revealing a strange hybrid piece of equipment. It had an unmistakably human design, a compact injector assembly, but its interior bristled with components in alien shapes. She attached the device to the sergeant's arm, pressed a sequence of digital commands on its side, and let it do its work. Tiny motes of light flickered around the man's wound, stabilizing tissue. Vital signs leveled out. Not only had she stopped the bleeding, but the soldier actually regained consciousness. Those who witnessed it stared in disbelief, especially the other medics, who recognized that her gear, though partially Terran, was beyond the scope of anything they had seen. That single rescue became the talk of the battered Terran lines. Soldiers whispered of a medic who seemed to have knowledge of both human and Drachnid biology. They speculated about the strange gear in her pack, perhaps stolen from an alien lab, or maybe she had dissected captured Drachnid technology. Some believed it was all rumor. But a day later, more incidents followed. Helena was spotted darting across open ground under sniper fire to reach a fallen private, then using an experimental foam to rebuild the soldier's collapsed lung. She neutralized infiltration toxins left behind by the Drachnid with a carefully engineered aerosol that scrambled their chemical composition. Everywhere she went, she saved someone who was on the brink of death. Word of this odd development soon reached the nearest Drachnid field command, led by Commander Zorkas. He had overseen the invasion of several human colonies before, always with minimal difficulty. This time, however, his subordinates brought disturbing reports. There was a human medic on the battlefield whose methods and technology challenged their usual advantage. Zorkas, a towering figure with chitinous plates lining his thorax and a pair of thick mandibles, listened carefully. He found the claim preposterous. Humans were behind the Drachnid in almost every aspect of biotechnological research. The Drachnid had studied them thoroughly and concluded that their medical science was primitive. Still, a pattern was emerging. Zorkas decided to dispatch a team of sharpshooters to eliminate the perceived threat. Human medics were typically easy targets, as they often exposed themselves to danger while tending to wounded. A night raid was launched on Greenhaven's main settlement. Plasma beams tore through the gloom, and the Drachnid troopers advanced with calm efficiency, forcing Terran defenders to retreat deeper into the ruins. In the midst of the firefight, Helena Blair was spotted carrying a wounded corporal across a blasted courtyard. She had no cover except the smoldering wrecks of vehicles scattered about. A perfect shot. One of the Drachnid snipers zeroed in, calibrating his rifle's energy output. He fired, yet Helena evaded the shot. She dove behind a crushed supply truck, but not before returning fire with a small sidearm. Her bullet didn't strike to kill. Instead, it impacted near the sniper, releasing a flash of bright pulses that clouded his scope. Stunned, the sniper's spotter reported that it created an electromagnetic haze that confused their targeting optics. It was unexpected, all the more so coming from a simple Zorkas, analyzing the post-action reports, felt both baffled and irritated. He demanded updated intelligence on any captured Terran technology. His science officers tried to rationalize it. Perhaps the humans had found a new sponsor among rival alien species. Or perhaps it was just a single anomaly, a peculiar genius. But as the next few days went by, more reports poured in. The humans were still getting pushed back, but their casualty numbers were slightly lower than expected. As if every time someone was about to die, Helena Blair appeared, patching together catastrophic injuries. Conditions in Greenhaven worsened. Drachnid bombardments continued, vital infrastructure crumbled, and the population hovered on the edge of a humanitarian catastrophe. Helena slept maybe an hour or two at a time. Her face grew gaunt from exhaustion, but she refused to stop. She coordinated with other medics, teaching them simpler hybrid techniques where possible, though full replication of her methods was impossible without her specialized gear. Terran officers began to suspect that Helena's knowledge didn't come solely from Earth's medical schools. She seemed intimately familiar with the biological intricacies of the Drachnid. In truth, Helena had a personal history that few knew. During her academy years, she had stumbled upon partially declassified research about Drachnid physiology. It intrigued her so much that she spent every spare moment diving deeper. Secretly, she had begun tinkering with ways to adapt certain Drachnid healing crystals, known for their unique resonant frequencies, into human-compatible technology. No official channel had funded her research. She pursued it out of sheer fascination and a stubborn conviction that knowledge could save lives. She kept her developments covert, building prototypes in hidden corners of research labs, never fully revealing her breakthroughs. Then, when war broke out, she quietly took her contraband gear and volunteered for the front line. Now that contraband gear was saving hundreds of Terran soldiers. She did not consider herself a hero, only a medic determined to prevent unnecessary deaths. If that meant drawing the attention of an entire alien empire, then so be it. Yet her presence did indeed draw attention, not only from human officers who began to see her as a security concern, but also from Drachnid strategists who wanted her dead. One morning, after Helena had been up all night in a makeshift medical bay, an urgent communication came through. High Command had designated her to join a critical mission on Zarthus, a colony world recently overrun by a mysterious biological agent that was ravaging the local population. Rumors said the Drachnid had unleashed it intentionally as a test of new warfare tactics. Zarthus, once a thriving industrial hub, now lay under a thick, toxic haze. People were dropping dead in the streets, Terran Marines reported, coughing up blood, and conventional medicines were useless. Helena boarded a cramped medical shuttle alongside a small team of doctors and scientists. Upon arrival, the devastation shocked even her. Entire neighborhoods stood vacant. their inhabitants either evacuated or deceased. Those who stayed behind were too sick to flee. Drachnid cruisers patrolled the planet's upper atmosphere, blocking any chance of large-scale rescue. The Terran High Command hesitated to send more reinforcements, fearing infection. The moment Helena's shuttle touched down, a frantic voice burst over the comms. "We've got an outbreak in Sector 9, civilians and Marines going into convulsions." She grabbed her gear, told the pilot to remain on standby, and sprinted toward the labyrinth of collapsed buildings where the outbreak was worst. Columns of smoke rose from areas where the local defense forces had tried to burn away the pathogen. Inside a ruined medical station, she found doctors overwhelmed. Dozens of patients lay on cots, moaning in pain. A Marine lieutenant gasped for breath, eyes wide with terror. She scanned him with one of her custom devices. The readouts showed an aggressive pathogen that rapidly mutated to evade standard treatments. She knelt by his side, hooking up an IV line. Everything about the infection screamed unnatural design. The microstructure of the organism was reminiscent of certain drachnid viral forms Helena had studied, but it was further spliced with something else. She realized it might be a hybrid, an intentional combination of genetic elements from multiple species. She transmitted her findings back to the small lab that had accompanied her on the shuttle. They verified that the pathogen contained traces of drachnid biology. To craft an effective cure, she needed living drachnid tissue samples. Without them, it was guesswork. The local humans had tried capturing a drachnid soldier, but that had ended in bloodshed. The drachnid were just as lethal here as anywhere else, sometimes deploying squads to hunt down survivors. Time was running out. After hours of desperate attempts to stabilize patients, Helena got her chance. A young Marine burst into the station, half carrying a wounded drachnid. The Marine's voice trembled. "He's not even a prisoner, he just stumbled in infected." Behind them, gunshots echoed in the distance. The drachnid soldier, riddled with shrapnel, had begun showing signs of infection. Black veins pulsing beneath his chitin, trembling limbs, labored breathing. It was a surreal sight. Normally, a human soldier bringing a wounded drachnid anywhere near a Terran aid station would be unthinkable. But desperation forced new precedents. Helena rushed over and carefully inspected the alien, who stared back with fierce, multifaceted eyes. She could tell he was in extreme pain, but pride kept him from pleading. He was too weak to resist. She knelt, pulling out her scanner and letting it calibrate to the drachnid's body. The results confirmed what she suspected. The soldier was infected by the same hybrid pathogen ravaging the humans. Whatever fear or hatred lingered between them was overshadowed by mutual survival. This was the best chance Helena would have to gather the data needed to craft a real antidote. Time blurred as she worked on both the drachnid and the human patients around them. She used a combination of basic Terran medical techniques, IV fluids, sedatives, careful application of disinfectant, and her advanced xenotech devices, measuring specific resonant frequencies. The drachnid soldier gave his name, Sorvel, a lieutenant in the Drachnid Empire. He coughed and tried to speak in broken Terran. Helena, surprisingly fluent in the drachnid dialect, responded with halting insectoid clicks and hisses. He realized she was addressing him in his native language. "Why, save me?" he asked in a rasping voice. "I am your enemy." Helena looked him straight in the eyes. "You're a living being in need of help. Right now, we have a bigger enemy, this disease." Behind them, more patients screamed for aid. She couldn't linger. She connected an odd apparatus to Sorvel's exoskeleton, some custom adaptation that used shards of drachnid healing crystals combined with a human-designed nano-injector. She explained that his immune system, if stimulated properly, might produce a unique antibody. That antibody, combined with certain proteins from her own blood, might hold the key to neutralizing the pathogen for both species. He groaned in pain, but offered a slight nod. Moments later, Helena made the bold decision to infect herself with a weakened sample of the pathogen. She needed her body to produce a parallel immune response in hopes that the synergy would create a viable cure. It was madness by most standards. Any miscalculation and she would die a horrible death. But she saw no other way. The clock was ticking, and High Command threatened to authorize orbital strikes that would wipe out every living thing on Zarthus if they believed the pathogen might spread off-world. She had to succeed before that final order was given. An agonizing half-day followed. In the improvised lab station, Helena and Servel were both connected to monitoring devices. The pathogen ravaged them, but Helena used every technique at her disposal to stabilize their vital signs, occasionally slipping into half-consciousness herself. Other doctors assisted, adjusting drips, scanning for mutations. As the hours crawled by, the microbe began to shift under the combined genetic pressure from Drachnid and human immune systems. At last, Helena's device pinged. The sample in the culture dish had abruptly collapsed on itself, burnt out by the modifications it had tried to assimilate. She forced her wary eyes to remain open. "We have it," she murmured, "a blueprint for the cure." She and the other doctors synthesized the first batch, tested it on a handful of critical patients. Within minutes, the patients' conditions improved. Miraculously, the cure seemed to work equally well on human and Drachnid physiology. Bolstered by the result, they scaled up production. The next challenge was distribution. The pathogen had spread across hundreds of kilometers, saturating the atmosphere in pockets. Only large-scale aerosol dispersal could reach all infected individuals, which required planetary-level deployment. That was when Helena reached out to Terran High Command to request access to the Planetary Defense Network, reprogramming it to release the cure into the air. The generals balked. Granting such broad access was risky. If anything went wrong, they might accidentally release a hyper-concentrated toxin. But Helena insisted, and time was so short that the Terran leadership finally relented. With Saravel's help, she recalibrated the satellite arrays to broadcast coded signals that would drive drone fleets carrying the antidote across Exarthus. The drones soared into the sky, each carrying canisters of the healing agent. From her vantage point atop a battered communications tower, Helena watched as the drones fanned out, releasing a faint blue mist that spread in the wind. City after city reported a drop in infection rates. Civilians who had been on the brink of death regained normal breathing. Drachnid soldiers caught in the throes of convulsions slowly recovered. The cure's effect rippled outward like a wave of relief. Then, just when success seemed assured, a colossal quake tore through Zarthus. The planet's crust, weakened by repeated bombardments and perhaps disturbed by the pathogen's toxic presence, partially collapsed in one of the major city sectors. Buildings tumbled, streets caved in. Sorvel, who had insisted on helping deliver canisters by ground transport, found himself trapped beneath falling rubble. Helena refused to abandon him. She rushed to the site with any available rescue team, ignoring the pleas of Terran officers who insisted that saving an alien soldier was not worth further risk. She found him pinned against broken metal beams, one of his legs crushed. The structural integrity around them was so precarious that any movement might trigger a total collapse, and the air remained laced with leftover toxic fumes from earlier. She tore off her protective helmet, placing it over Sorvel's head so he could keep breathing purified oxygen. She knew the planet's atmosphere, still tainted, would be dangerous to her as well. But she had adapted her bloodstream with a partial infusion earlier, giving her limited resistance. She would last a bit longer without a helmet if she was lucky. Her face burned in the toxic air and her lungs felt like they were on fire. Still, she heaved debris aside, calling for more help. Some Terran Marines joined her, having heard rumors that she had even saved Drachnid soldiers before. Eventually, they freed Sorovel and hoisted him onto a makeshift stretcher. She half collapsed from inhaling the fumes, her vision dimming. The Marines carried both of them to safety moments before the rest of the structure caved in. Later, as the cure took hold across Zarthus, the overall death toll was far lower than predicted. It was a victory that never would have happened without Helena's unorthodox methods and willingness to treat all life as worthy. Even High Command, known for its reluctance to deviate from standard protocols, had to concede that she had saved millions of lives. With Zarthus stabilized, the Drachnid presence there dissolved into confusion. Their leadership had not expected their own troops to be saved alongside humans. Some Drachnid warriors began to doubt their empire's propaganda about human inferiority. Word of the battlefield angel spread rapidly. Terran soldiers recounted how she had dashed through withering fire, how she had fused human and Drachnid medical knowledge to cure an unprecedented biological threat. Even some Drachnid frontline units, through hush-hush channels, acknowledged that a human medic had rescued their kin. They spoke of her with grudging respect. For the first time in living memory, soldiers on both sides recognized a singular figure as a beacon of hope, rather than as an enemy or an asset to be destroyed. Not everyone welcomed this new development. Certain factions within the Drachnid hierarchy found the entire notion of a human surpassing them in biotech humiliating. Rumors circulated about a Drachnid high commander named Kulroth, who wanted to recapture Zarthus using more savage force to erase any sign of defeat. Meanwhile, others within the Empire, including Commander Zorkas, began to question whether the war was truly worth pursuing. If humans were capable of healing even Drachnid casualties, perhaps there was a different path forward. The tension within the Drachnid Empire grew. High-level councils debated how to handle the human medicus meddling. Some argued for intensifying the war, employing more terrifying weapons, or even launching an all-out genocide. Others advocated a more careful approach. It became clear that the Drachnid leadership itself was divided. On the Terran side, Helena's superiors considered her a diplomatic wildcard. She was not a diplomat by training, yet it seemed she had opened a door that decades of negotiations had failed to crack. The Terran High Council extended an invitation to certain Drachnid representatives for a parley, offering potential cooperation in medical research. It was an unorthodox move, but the successes on Zarthus made them believe there was a chance, however slim, that this war could be halted. Those talks were scheduled to occur on a neutral space station called Orion. Helena was asked, practically begged, to attend. She felt out of her depth. She was just a combat medic, not a politician. But her voice carried influence on both sides, as proven on the battlefield. After some hesitation, she agreed to represent the new wave of Terran sentiment that sought peace, or at least a ceasefire long enough to explore the potential for joint biotech breakthrough. The Orion station was an aging cylinder of metal orbiting a dim star. Its corridors were neutral territory, policed by an independent security force that had sworn to ensure no violence broke out during the summit. But tension hung in the recycled air. Delegations arrived in small, cautious groups. Terran admirals, Drachnid envoys, a scattering of other minor allied species curious to see if a ceasefire was really possible. Helena wore a formal variation of her medic's uniform, the Red Cross symbol prominent on her chest. Soravel attended alongside her as the sole Drachnid soldier who had personally fought alongside her to end the Zarthus outbreak. He was still recovering from his injuries, walking with a limp, yet determined to support a shift in his empire's stance. The station's main concourse was laid out with rows of chairs, facing a dais where the negotiators would speak. Helena didn't know the protocol. She only knew how to speak plainly about saving lives, about how a synergy of Terran and Drachnid medicine could yield marvels. When the official negotiations began, it was soon evident how deep the rifts ran. High Commander Kulroth had arrived unexpectedly with a small escort. He bristled with hostility, openly declaring that the Drachnid Empire did not accept any notion of human equality, much less collaboration. Others, like Commander Zorkas, who had begun questioning the war, tried to counter Kulroth's arguments. Helena listened quietly at first, but eventually they asked her to speak. She stood on trembling legs, scanning the room. On one side, suspicious Terran admirals who had once viewed her as a security risk. On the other, towering Drachnid officers, mandibles clicking with disdain. She swallowed her nerves and began describing her experiences. The countless lives she saw slipping away, the havoc of war, the horrifying potential of genetically engineered pathogens that neither side could truly control. She spoke of how she had risked her own life to merge Drachnid and human biotech, and how it saved thousands of individuals from both species on Zarthus. A hush fell. Some admired her conviction, Others were outraged that she would dare suggest there was a moral imperative to end the conflict. Kulroth growled that her words were nonsense, that the Draconid Empire would crush any peace attempts. But there was an undercurrent of uncertainty in the air. Zorkas asked for proof. Helena produced her recorded data. A thorough analysis of how the Zarthus cure was derived from combined. Serval confirmed the details, adding that he was living proof of a human's willingness to save an alien life. Just as the debate seemed to inch toward the possibility of a ceasefire, an explosion rocked the station, lights flickered, and the entire concourse erupted in confusion. Kulroth had arranged for a sabotage, a covert bomb to disrupt the meeting and pin blame on the humans if possible, effectively wrecking the negotiation. The blast collapsed part of the ceiling, injuring delegates on both sides. In the swirling dust and chaos, Helena sprang into action without hesitation. Her formal uniform was shredded by debris, but she still had her medic's pack and some emergency supplies. Drachnid and human alike lay wounded and moaning on the ground. Choking on the acrid smoke, she rushed to triage the most critical cases. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the raw adrenaline of crisis mode. She found a Drachnid officer pinned under twisted metal, bleeding from a gash in his thorax. He was from Kulroth's entourage, but that didn't matter. She pried the metal aside with help from a Terran Marine and sealed the officer's wound using a rapidly expanding coagulant foam derived from her cross-species research. Then she moved on, stooping to a human delegate whose leg was mangled. She stabilized him with a brace, administered painkillers. Time blurred once again into a frantic tapestry of moans, medical readouts, and the smell of burning conduits. In the confusion, Kulroth tried to finish what the sabotage had begun. He aimed a concealed energy pistol at Helena, blaming her for everything. Sorovel intercepted him, grappling to knock the pistol away, screaming that she had saved his life and that Kulroth was sabotaging any chance for an honorable resolution. The confrontation was short but violent. Sparks flew, and Kulroth managed to slash at Sorovel's wounded leg. Helena heard the commotion and threw herself between them, arms spread wide. She shouted at Kulroth to look around, to see that the sabotage had harmed Drachnid as well as Terran delegates. Did he really crave a war so deeply that he was willing to kill his own for it? For a moment, Kulroth's mandibles clicked in hesitation. He snarled something about preserving the Empire's honor. Then security forces swarmed in and disarmed him, dragging him away. In the aftermath, Helena realized she had been grazed by a piece of shrapnel along her side. The wound bled, but with characteristic stoicism, she continued treating the fallen delegates. Her blood soaked through part of her uniform, mixing with the dust. Slowly, the station's emergency systems came back online, clearing away the smoke. The sabotage had failed to destroy the entire concourse, though it had taken a toll in injury. Many things changed that day. Though some Drachnid leaders continued to resist peace, others, including Zorkas, had witnessed the raw truth of Helena's commitment. Their perspective shifted, seeing that humans were not as primitive or malicious as once believed. Conversely, the Terran admirals, seeing Drachnid willingness to at least salvage the negotiations, agreed to a partial ceasefire. Over the ensuing weeks, ambassadors hammered out a preliminary agreement allowing cross-species medical collaboration. Helena's name echoed across the Terran colonies and, quietly, through Drachnid ranks. Soldiers on both sides told stories of how she had dashed through gunfire, braved lethal toxins, pulled the wounded from rubble. They called her the battlefield angel, a being who had turned the tide in ways no one expected, not through a superweapon, but through healing. Some insisted that she was responsible for the greatest impetus toward lasting peace the galaxy had ever seen. Years passed. The war did not end overnight, but it slowed considerably as more Drachnid factions joined the call for a truce. Eventually, an official treaty was signed, one that opened the door for broader cooperation in medical science. The next generation of Terran and Drachnid physicians studied the Blair Protocol, a body of research that combined exoskeletal regeneration with human cellular therapies. Entire lines of medical breakthroughs emerged, universal translators for biological data, living bandages that could adapt to multiple species, vaccines that overcame old interplanetary diseases. And at the center of it all, Helena Blair found herself hailed as a galactic legend, though she had never sought fame. She continued her work, establishing cross-species medical academies, training new waves of doctors and medics. In a symbolic moment, she visited a drachnid hatchery and helped treat fragile young larvae born prematurely. After centuries of hostility, the sight of a human medic gently caring for drachnid offspring was as profound as any treatise. Historians would later debate the precise moment the war truly began to end. Some said it was the day Helena saved Zarthus from the engineered plague. Others pointed to the standoff on Orion Station, when the saboteurs failed to derail the negotiations. Still others believed it was earlier, back at Greenhaven, when a weary but determined medic refused to let soldiers on the brink of death simply perish. However it is remembered, the fact remained that the Drachnid Empire had underestimated a human combat medic on the battlefield. They expected little more than a frail figure easily eliminated. Instead, they encountered an indomitable spirit who took every scrap of medical knowledge she could obtain, human or alien, and turned it into a tool for saving lives. She did not fight with a rifle aimed to kill, but with a determination aimed to heal, and in doing so, she shattered the illusions of her enemies and changed the course of history. Decades later, in the newly founded Reeves Blair Medical Institute on Terra Prime, a group of drachnid and human medical students listened to a lecture on xenobiology. A hologram flickered on the wide display, showing archival footage from the war. They watched as Helena Blair, her hair matted with sweat, her uniform streaked with blood, secured a makeshift dressing around a grievously wounded Marine. Then in the same video, she turned to provide emergency stabilizing aid to a drachnid soldier lying nearby. The students were awestruck. They had grown up in a galaxy where cooperation between species was a given. Seeing how it had been forged in fire and crisis moved them deeply. Outside the lecture hall, a statue stood depicting Helena in her combat medic gear, a universal medical kit slung over her shoulder. The plaque read, "She healed the wounded of every species and showed us that unity is forged by compassion." Tourists would pause, some leaving flowers or tokens of thanks. Drachnid visitors sometimes placed decorative shells, symbolic of their respect. Meanwhile, the memory of war receded. The lines of conflict softened into diplomatic boundaries. Entire squads of multi-species peacekeepers patrolled volatile regions, each guided by a shared code of ethics that had been born from Helena's example. Research facilities on once hostile worlds invited scientists from every corner of the galaxy to collaborate on grand projects, tackling diseases that ravaged entire solar systems, finding ways to reconcile the differences in xenobiological architecture, discovering how to optimize healing crystals for new species. Helena herself lived to see much of that progress, though she never quite grew comfortable with her legendary status. She maintained that any dedicated medic in her place would have done the same. Many disputed that. They argued that her unique blend of fearlessness, empathy, and cross-species knowledge was extraordinary. In private, they whispered that if she had never set foot on Greenhaven, tens of millions more would have perished. The galaxy left in perpetual turmoil. Perhaps so. One quiet evening in the orchard of a research colony that had once been a war zone, Helena sat with Soravel. His leg had been permanently damaged, so he moved with a cane, but he had found new purpose. He served as a liaison between the Drachnid scientific community and Terran medical teams. They shared a pot of tea, ironically brewed from local alien flora, whose taste both of them had come to appreciate. They talked about the day they first encountered each other, him nearly succumbing to the plague, her risking everything to pull him through. Their conversation drifted to how far the galaxy had come, once locked in mortal combat, now forging alliances that shaped the future. They laughed at the notion that so many old stereotypes still lingered in the corners of the galaxy. Some Terrans who distrusted insectoid forms, some Drachnid who clung to the notion of Terrans as weak. But the shift was undeniable. The seeds of unity had been sown. It might take generations to fully blossom, but they had taken root. Neither Helena nor Soravel claimed credit for it, but they understood how pivotal their actions and sacrifices had been. In time, a new generation of Terran Drachnid children grew up reading about Helena's legendary feats. Some even wrote essays aspiring to become medics themselves, to follow in her footsteps. On the Drachnid homeworld, the Imperial archives included scrolls about the battlefield angel, acknowledging that underestimating her had been one of the Empire's greatest errors, and one of its greatest awakenings. When asked in her old age how she wished to be remembered, Helena smiled softly. "As a medic who did her best," she replied. And, as proof that no species holds a monopoly on knowledge or compassion, we only move forward when we share what we have. That was her legacy, a quiet statement that echoed across star systems, bridging differences once thought insurmountable. The Drachnid had indeed underestimated a human medic on the battlefield. She became the guardian of countless lives, and in the swirl of histories, her name took its place beside the greatest figures of peace. She became a galactic legend, not by conquering, but by healing. Commander Orion Black stepped off the transport shuttle into the bustling heart of Stellar Oasis, a luxury space station floating like a brilliant jewel in the vast darkness. He had just returned from a perilous hostage rescue operation on a remote ice planet known as Revath 7. There, he and his team had traversed hazardous terrain, wearing specialized suits to withstand sub-zero temperatures, laser-cutting their way through enemy fortifications to free ambassadors from various interstellar governments. The entire ordeal had left him exhausted, though he maintained the hardened composure of a combat medic who had seen his share of dire situations. Now, he was granted 12 hours of shore leave, but given that his commanding officer, Captain Stryker, had abruptly summoned him for a confidential briefing right before he boarded the shuttle, Orion sensed that he might not fully enjoy his downtime. As he looked around, the station's polished corridors gleamed under bright artificial light, and countless travelers, human, Aoran, Devarian, and other alien species, moved with purposeful strides toward shops, bars, gambling halls, and entertainment venues. The station was famed for its panoramic lounge, exclusive suites, and particularly for offering a chance to indulge in rare luxuries that most frontier soldiers could only dream of. He took a deep breath, inhaling air that was filtered and recycled, though scented with a faint tang of exotic spices from the alien vendors who owned small kiosks. Everywhere he looked, he glimpsed the swirl of multicolored uniforms and the hum of voices in dozens of different languages. This was the busiest hub in the sector, a crossroads of commerce, recreation, and covert dealings that thrived on the fringes of galactic civilization. Orion walked toward the Halcyon Lounge, a popular spot rumored to have the best selection of interstellar beverages. Inside, the decor merged futuristic design with soft, ambient lighting. The lounge provided an exquisite view of the surrounding stars through a transparent, reinforced window that stretched from floor to ceiling. Plush chairs and circular tables were arranged with a careful eye for both privacy and style, while a subtle, melodic soundtrack played from hidden speakers. He approached the bar and ordered a distilled beverage from Earth known as Baltic Fire, an extremely potent drink made with a carefully regulated fermentation process. The bartender, a lean, reptilian being with jade scales, nodded and began preparing the beverage with practiced motions, pouring the liquid into a tall, crystalline glass. Orion settled onto a stool and let the tension in his shoulders ease, trying to forget the chaos of Revath 7. Yet as soon as the bartender slid his drink across the counter, Orion noticed a figure seated several stools away. A woman with greenish-blue skin, silver-white hair falling in sleek waves around her shoulders, dressed in a form-fitting outfit that seemed simultaneously practical and exotic. She was leaning forward, rubbing her calf with an expression of discomfort that made Orion's professional instincts flare up. He sipped his Baltic Fire, feeling the distinctive burn down his throat, and debated whether to intervene. As a medic, it was second nature to him to help, but he had encountered individuals who despised unsolicited assistance. After a few moments of hesitation, curiosity and compassion won out. He moved to the stool next to her, making sure to keep a respectful distance. "Excuse me," he began, voice calm. "I couldn't help but notice you seem to be in pain. I'm Orion Black. I serve as a combat medic in the Interstellar Alliance. If you need help," she glanced up, eyes the color of a distant nebula, narrowing with guarded suspicion. Her pupils, shaped distinctly unlike a human's, responded to the lounge's lighting with a subtle contraction. "You're a human," she observed, her tone laced with a slight edge. "Why would a human offer me medical aid out of nowhere?" He smiled in what he hoped was a friendly, non-threatening way. "Because I can see you're in discomfort and it's my job to fix injuries. If you'd rather I mind my own business, I'll move along." She studied him for a moment, then let out a soft exhale. "I'm Nalia," she said. Her voice had a melodic quality that resonated even in that brief greeting. "I twisted my calf during a sparring session, and it's not healing as quickly as I'd like. I'm traveling, and it's been hard to find proper treatment." Orion nodded, carefully evaluating her posture. "I have some training in therapeutic massage and battlefield first aid. If you'll let me, I can try to help relieve that pain, or at least reduce the inflammation." Nanya hesitated, but there was a flicker in her gaze, perhaps curiosity or desperation. She nodded, shifting on her stool. "All right, but if this is some sort of pickup line, I'll know," he chuckled. "Trust me, I have more effective ways of flirting if that were my goal." He set down his glass, pulled a small medkit from his pocket, and gestured for her to rest her leg across his lap. She complied, albeit warily, revealing a slender calf with faint turquoise markings that shimmered under the lounge's ambient lights. He laid his hands gently on her muscle, feeling for knots and tension. Instantly she winced, and he murmured an apology. "There's a definite strain here," he said, pressing his thumb along a sensitive spot. "Your muscle fibers are contracted in a tight bundle. I can work through them, if you trust me." She gritted her teeth, but he could see she was determined to endure the discomfort if it meant possible relief. With controlled pressure, Orion applied the techniques he had learned during advanced medical training. Within minutes, the stiff tension yielded under his hands. Nalia's breathing gradually changed, from quick, shallow inhales of pain to calmer, measured exhalations. "That feels," she paused, eyebrows arching in surprise, "like the pain is dissolving. How are you doing that?" He smiled wryly. "Humans have studied therapeutic touch for millennia. We have a lot of techniques for realigning muscle fibers, increasing blood flow, and enhancing the body's natural healing. They are not always used in a battlefield context, but I found them invaluable when we had no advanced equipment in the field." She flexed her foot experimentally and let out a soft gasp of astonishment. "The cramp is almost gone," she murmured. Then she gave him a look of genuine wonder. "You truly are a healer." Orion gently lowered her leg and returned to his stool. "Glad I could help. A few hours of rest, maybe an ice pack, and you'll be walking without any pain by tomorrow." She leaned back, taking a moment to process what had just happened. The tension in her shoulders had visibly lessened. "I owe you, Orion Black. Thank you." Her tone had softened, and he noticed that her defensive posture was no longer so pronounced. He shrugged, about to say it was nothing, but his comm device buzzed with an incoming message. The device vibrated against his thigh, and he glanced down to see a coded alert from Captain Stryker. His lips tightened slightly. Something about that rescue mission had never sat right with him, especially when Stryker hinted there was more at stake than saving a few ambassadors. He silenced the alert for the moment, not wanting to be rude. "Bad news?" Nalia asked, evidently noticing the faint flicker of concern on his face. "Could be," he replied, pocketing the device. "I'll deal with it later. Are you all right if I leave you for a minute? Let me settle my tab." She nodded. "Yes. But meet me at that table in the corner? There's something I'd like to discuss once you're free. I promise it won't take long." Intrigued, Orion paid for his drink, thanking the bartender. He saw Nalia walk, tentatively at first but with far more ease than before, to a quiet table near a curved window that displayed the twinkling cosmos outside. He joined her soon after, curiosity mounting. He wondered if this had anything to do with the clandestine mission Captain Stryker had alluded to. But he kept his expression neutral. Nalia drew a deep breath, then lowered her voice. "Look, I normally wouldn't ask a stranger for help, but I can't deny how skilled you are, and I sense you might be a decent man. I have a proposition, though I'm not entirely sure how you'll respond." He raised an eyebrow. "A proposition? Let me guess. You have more bruises that need tending?" A faint smile touched her lips. "Not exactly. I need someone with medical expertise, especially in the neural or muscular domain. And yes, my leg fiasco is part of the reason I'm seeking help. I'm working on a personal project, something that could help people across the galaxy. But I need more knowledge about human medicine." Urian sipped the last of his Baltic fire. "That's interesting. My knowledge is broad, but specialized for combat scenarios might not fit your needs." Her gaze held steady. "We can talk details later, but if you're open to it, I'd like to hire you as a consultant, or at least get your advice. There's a private area on the station where we can speak more freely, but first, let's say we meet tomorrow morning? I promise I'll pay for your time." He studied her, trying to read the sincerity in her features. "Fine. I'll hear you out. But I'm not guaranteeing anything. I also have obligations that might complicate things." She gave him a brief nod. "Fair enough. I appreciate your honesty." They parted ways soon after, and Orion navigated the throng of tourists and station workers, eventually arriving at the designated quarters for Alliance personnel. He expected to unwind, but the moment he stepped inside, a holographic call request blinked from the console on the wall. Captain Stryker's face materialized, stern and imposing. "Commander Black," Stryker began, skipping formalities, "I trust your journey back was smooth?" "More or less," Orion replied, removing his jacket. "Sir, I'm due for my shore leave. Is there something urgent?" Stryker's digital visage flickered. "I'm afraid so. We have new intel. Your mission on Ravoth 7 was in fact a cover for a deeper operation. High Command believes there's a project known as the Neural Bridge being developed by a certain conglomerate, possibly the Rathari family, suspected of turning a legitimate medical procedure into a mind control weapon." Orion's stomach sank. "So the rumors are true. What do you need from me?" "We have reason to believe a Rathari affiliate might be on Stellar Oasis. If they are, and if you can establish contact, you are to gather intel and, if possible, acquire evidence. This is top priority, Commander. Billions of lives could be at stake if a mind control device reaches the wrong hands." Orion cleared his throat, remembering Nalia's slight hesitation, her cryptic talk of needing a medical consultant. "Understood. Any leads on the person's identity?" "Not yet. Stay alert and be discreet. High Command specifically chose you for your medical background and your skill in infiltration. This is not a smash and grab. You must gain trust, glean information, and then we'll decide our next move." Stryker's face vanished. Orion stood there, tension coiled in his chest. He set his medkit down and began a mental inventory of the new developments. Something told him that Nalia's request for help was not mere coincidence. He worried about crossing moral lines, about leading someone on to extract intelligence. Then again, the possibility that she was directly tied to a mind control project was alarming. He decided to see how events would unfold in the morning. He hardly slept, mind churning with hypothetical scenarios. When morning arrived according to station time, Orion tidied himself up, donned casual civilian attire to avoid drawing suspicion, and headed to the meeting place Nalia had specified, a small tea house that served aromatic blends from dozens of star systems. She was already there, seated near a holographic waterfall that cascaded along the wall in a mesmerizing loop. Her leg, it seemed, was moving freely now, and she managed a polite smile when she saw him. He slid into the seat across from her. The tea house was warm and fragrant, the low hum of conversation providing a comfortable backdrop. Nalia clasped her hands together on the table. "I realize you have no reason to trust me," she started. "But I do want to be transparent." Oriana nodded, taking a moment to soak in the exotic patterns on her outfit. "Go on." "I'm Nalia Rithari," she admitted, her voice subdued. "My family controls a major conglomerate involved in biotech and energy extraction. We have ties all over the galaxy, some benign, some less so. I came here hoping to escape certain pressures at home and to find someone with the knowledge I lack." He took a slow breath. "So she was precisely who High Command suspected." "You said you need help with a project." Her eyes flicked around as though scanning for eavesdroppers. "Yes, I can't give you every detail yet, but it involves a neural interface that was originally designed to help people recover from neurological injuries. Unfortunately, certain factions want to weaponize it." Orion set his hands on the table. "That's a serious accusation. Does your family know about your plan to sabotage or prevent the weaponization?" She let out a bitter laugh. "My father, Elias Rithari, is under pressure from various alliances, including rumors of a link to the Krell Dominion, a group known for their oppressive tactics. They want a device that can forcibly link minds, overriding one's free will. I want no part of it." She paused. "I have some encrypted data that could help me alter the device's functionality, but I need someone who understands both the medical aspect and the tactical viewpoint." "You see where you come in?" Orion's pulse quickened. This was exactly the scenario Stryker had warned him about. He weighed his options. "And you're sure it can be turned from a weapon back into a medical device?" he asked, feigning ignorance about the Alliance's interest. She nodded firmly. "The fundamental technology is about bridging neural pathways to jumpstart healing. It's not inherently evil, but if you calibrate it to override personal autonomy, it becomes a mind control apparatus. That's what the Krell want to buy, with my father's reluctant cooperation." Before Orion could frame a response, two men in dark uniforms materialized near the entrance. Their black attire looked vaguely militaristic, with no obvious insignia. One of them scanned the room, making eye contact with Nalia. She inhaled sharply. "Mercenaries," she whispered. "They must have tracked me here." Orion calmly took a sip of his tea. "We should leave," he said, carefully reaching under the table to unclip the small stunner he carried. "I assume they're not here to chat?" Nalia offered a humorless smile. "They've confronted me twice. They're working for someone who wants me silenced or dragged back home." Together they slipped out the back exit. The cramped corridor smelled of cleaning solution and spilled beverages. The murmur of the tea house was replaced by the low hum of the station's ventilation system. Orion could feel his muscles tense. Leading Nalia around a corner, he swiftly guided her through a staff entrance that opened into a broader hallway. The sound of heavy boots echoed behind them. She hissed in frustration. "They're persistent. There must be more than two if they're trying a pincer move." Sure enough, another figure stepped out from an intersecting hallway, blocking their path. Nalia clenched her fists, but Orion calmly raised the stunner, set it to a wide beam, and fired. The mercenary collapsed, groaning. Orion grabbed Nalia's wrist and pulled her into a side passage. They raced past crates and supply boxes, ignoring the startled workers who shouted in protest. Another pair of mercenaries spotted them. A brief flash of light seared the air as an energy bolt zipped overhead. Nalia ducked and pressed herself against the wall. "I thought I'd have more time before they found me." "You're sure you're not second-guessing your involvement?" With adrenaline in his veins, Orion retorted, "I've been in worse scraps. Stick close." He popped out of cover long enough to fire a warning shot, forcing the mercenaries to scatter. Then he gestured for Nalia to move forward. They zigzagged through the corridor, eventually merging into a crowd of tourists near the main concourse. The mercenaries hesitated to shoot with so many bystanders, which gave Orion and Nalia the opening they needed to slip away. Panting, they took refuge behind a cluster of maintenance drones that were recharging near a maintenance hatch. Nalia steadied herself. "I have a secure suite near the top of the station's ring. It has biometric locks. We'll be safe there." Orion, heart-pounding, could practically hear Captain Stryker's warning in his head. This is precisely the infiltration we wanted. But he pushed the thought aside. There was no point in turning her over or sending her to the Alliance yet. He wanted to find out more. "Lead the way," he said. They managed to lose the remaining pursuers by weaving through a hollow casino, dodging the swirling lights and throngs of gamblers who barely noticed them. At last, they arrived at a discreet elevator that required Nalia's DNA scan. The lift ascended smoothly, leaving the chaos behind. The suite they entered was as lavish as one might expect from an influential Rithari heiress. Plush seating, a panoramic window displaying the star field beyond, and advanced security systems that whirred quietly in the background. Once the door sealed shut, Nalia engaged multiple locks. She turned to Orion, tension evident in her taut shoulders. "Thank you," she said, her voice slightly breathless. "I know I dragged you into this, but you're proving to be more than I hoped for." He offered a tight smile. "I'm still trying to figure out exactly what I've gotten myself into, but clearly those people aren't going to stop. If your father is behind them, or if there's another faction—" She shook her head. "I suspect it's a combination of my father's enforcers and possibly some third party that wants to either capture or eliminate me. Regardless, we have little time. The neural bridge prototype may be transferred to the Krell soon if it hasn't already left our main labs." Orion glanced at a minor burn on his arm from a near-miss shot. "You're telling me we need to intervene?" "Yes," she said, almost pleading. "We can't let it fall into the hands of the Krell. And if my father is complicit, then we have to figure out how to either stop him or convince him otherwise. That's the reason I left home. My father and I have never seen eye to eye on moral issues." He opened the medkit he always carried and ran a small healing device over his burn. "I see. You want my medical expertise to rewrite or disable the mind control capabilities of the neural bridge." "That's exactly right, or at least to ensure it can't be used forcibly. It's not a process I can handle alone. My background is in xenobiology, not advanced neural firmware." She stepped closer, examining his burn. "Are you all right?" He nodded, noticing the concern in her eyes. "I'll live." For a moment their gazes locked, and Orion felt an unexpected surge of warmth. She was undeniably captivating, but he also recognized the precariousness of the situation. "I need to rest, and I need more information. Then we plan." Nalia exhaled, as if relieved he hadn't refused. "Agreed. The bedroom is through there. You can sleep on the bed. I'll take the couch. If you prefer, I can—" He raised a hand. "No need. I'll be fine on the couch. I'm more used to bunking in rough conditions anyway." She seemed about to protest, but she acquiesced, probably out of sheer exhaustion herself. He cleared off a spot on the couch as she lingered, checking that every security measure was in place. The lights dimmed to a soft glow. Orion lay back, turning the day's events over in his mind. He knew that Captain Stryker would demand a progress update soon, but he dreaded the idea of telling High Command that he was forging a deeper alliance with Nalia. He had a gnawing feeling that his personal ethics and official duties were on a collision course. He dozed fitfully and woke a few hours later, uncertain whether it was morning by station cycles or not. Nalia was already awake, reviewing data on a holographic display. She wore a simple sleeveless shirt and pants, looking more casual yet still exuding an air of refined grace. She turned when she sensed movement behind her. "Sleep well?" she asked softly. He stretched. "About as well as a soldier can on a plush couch, yes." She gestured to the display. "I've compiled what I know. Neural Bridge was conceptualized as a way to share healthy neural pathways with those suffering from degenerative brain conditions. Imagine being able to imprint the patterns of a healthy motor function onto someone who's lost the ability to walk." "It sounds remarkable," Orion said, coming over to stand beside her. "But let me guess, someone figured out that you could invert that process, push the neural patterns forcibly into someone's brain, effectively overriding their own. Exactly. And because the Rethari conglomerate is large, with various energy and biotech interests, the device found itself at the center of political deals. She paused the holo and looked at him. Orion, I need you to see the prototypes. I know the main labs are on a planet called Tenaris, a desert world that my family uses for secret research due to its isolation. He frowned. You plan to go there? Isn't that basically walking into the lion's den? It is, she admitted. But we have no choice. We have to ensure the device is reprogrammed or destroyed before the Krell can finalize the transaction. Otherwise, she let the implication hang. Billions of enslaved minds, a travesty on an unimaginable scale. Orion nodded grimly. All right, let's do it. But we'll need a ship, supplies, and a plan for infiltration. They set about gathering what they needed. By midday station time, they stepped out of the suite, making sure the corridor was clear. Orion led the way, his gaze flicking left and right for any sign of mercenaries. They navigated through a half-dozen levels, descending into a chaotic section of the station that housed smaller docks. There, small personal crafts were often bought, sold, or rented by travelers. That was when an alarm blared through the station's loudspeakers. The instant surge of adrenaline shot through Orion as he saw a squad of black-clad mercenaries flooding the corridor, weapons in hand, scanning for targets. Civilians scattered, screaming. A staccato of gunfire tore through the air, bursts of bright energy leaving scorched marks on the walls. He yanked Nalia back. Get down! A firefight erupted. Orion's soldier instincts kicked in. He returned fire with practiced precision, dropping 2 mercenaries. Nalia, pressed against a bulkhead, cursed under her breath, probably regretting not being better armed. The station's security system responded with flaring lights and metallic shutters that began sliding down certain corridors, attempting to contain the chaos. Orion's stunner hissed as he shot down another mercenary. He risked a glance at Nalia. We can't stay here. There's an auxiliary dock on the next level. If we can get there, we might find a small craft to escape. She nodded, eyes steeled with resolve. They sprinted through swirling smoke, jumping over debris from a small explosion that had rattled a kiosk selling alien trinkets. 2 mercenaries tried to cut them off at an intersection, but Orion unleashed a covering volley, forcing them to take cover. They dashed past, ducking stray blasts that streaked overhead. By the time they reached the auxiliary dock, Orion felt a searing pain in his side. One of the mercenaries' blasts had grazed him, leaving a sizzling burn. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself to remain upright. Nalia spotted a compact vessel on the dock's manifest, quickly hacking the control panel. The ship's hatch opened with a pneumatic hiss. They scrambled aboard. Orion collapsed into a seat near the pilot console, pressing a hand to his injury. Nalia took one look and paled. You're hit! Olive, he managed, though his vision swam. He tried to focus on sealing the ship's door. Nalia initiated an emergency launch procedure. The docking clamps released, and the vessel lurched forward. Through the cockpit viewport, Orion saw the station's hull recede, the swirling blackness of space enveloping them. Then stars and distant cosmic ribbons came into focus. The ship's thrusters engaged, propelling them away from stellar oasis. As the adrenaline waned, Orion felt the burn intensify, each shallow breath sending sharp pangs through his torso. Nalia rushed to his side. Let me see, she murmured, gently lifting the charred fabric of his shirt. The wound was ugly. Energy burns always carried the risk of deeper tissue damage that normal first aid might not fully handle. Just clean it, he said, forcibly calm. We have to jump to FTL soon. She rummaged through the medical supplies they'd hastily packed, finding an injectable coagulant and antiseptic. This might not be enough, she said, biting her lip. Plasma burns can disrupt the autonomic system. I've seen it happen. He nodded, trying to steady his breathing, but there was a tremor in his hand. Then, do what you can. Nalia's expression darkened with determination. There is one option. The neural bridge is capable of a partial link, even in a simplified form. We designed a portable version for field use, though we never completed full trials. It's risky, but it could help your body accelerate healing. He blinked. Mind swimming. Is that even possible between different species? She pursed her lips. It was never tested cross-species, but from what we learned last night, your skillful approach to muscle therapy created an unusual synergy between your physiology and mine. If we replicate that effect on a neural level, we might align just enough to mend the damage. Orion struggled to stay conscious, pain clouding his thoughts. Do it. I trust you. She carefully attached 2 small circular devices to each of their temples, connecting them with a handheld module that flashed an array of lights. Try to relax, she whispered, pressing a button that activated the link. A low hum resonated in Orion's skull, and suddenly he was neither on the ship nor entirely in his own body. He floated in a swirl of colored lights, intangible threads of thought weaving around him. He sensed Nalia's presence, her mind swirling with concern and determination. She reached out mentally, guiding him through the labyrinth of neural pathways that had begun to misfire due to the energy burn. He glimpsed fragments of her memories, a lonely childhood in a sprawling estate, forced etiquette lessons, scientific labs filled with advanced equipment, arguments with her father about the direction of their research. She saw shards of his life, brutal firefights on distant worlds, the camaraderie of a platoon, the moral burden of deciding who lived and who died in triage situations. The 2 sets of experiences meshed for an instant, forging a sense of intimacy neither had known possible. Gradually, Orion felt the throbbing heat in his side diminish, the damaged cells knitting back under the influence of the neural prompting. It was unlike any medical procedure he had experienced, a merging of will and biology, spurred by the device but powered by the synergy of their mindsets. Then the link disengaged with a soft ping, leaving him gasping in the cockpit. Nalia removed the devices, trembling. It worked, she breathed, as if in disbelief. The wound was not entirely gone, but it looked far less severe, and the searing pain had receded to a dull ache. Orion flexed his fingers, marveling at the relief flooding his system. That was extraordinary, he managed. I saw your memories, she nodded. And I saw yours. We can talk about it later. For now, we have a rendezvous with Destiny on Tanaris. She quickly set the navigation, and the ship leapt into faster-than-light travel, leaving the station and the mercenaries behind. During the FTL journey, they had time to rest, though the neural link lingered in their consciousness. Occasionally, Oriana felt subtle echoes of Nalia's emotions. They debated whether it was a residual effect or purely psychosomatic. Regardless, it made them more attuned to each other, exchanging few words yet understanding their mutual sense of urgency. When they dropped out of FTL, Tanaris sprawled beneath them, a dusty brown sphere crisscrossed by swirling sandstorms. The navigation beacon led them to a remote facility partially built into a steep canyon. As they descended, Orion switched the ship to a stealth approach, hoping the planetary sensors wouldn't detect them. The facility was clearly high-tech, though disguised amidst craggy rock formations. Automated turrets and patrolling drones attested to the seriousness of its security. Nalia guided Orion through a hidden landing approach, leveraging old codes she had memorized. The ship touched down in a sub-level hangar with minimal fanfare. They stepped out into a dimly lit chamber that smelled of coolant and ozone. Orion felt a slight unsteadiness in his steps. Though mostly healed, the burn had left him weaker than usual. Nalia slid an arm around his waist to support him. The lab is deeper inside, she whispered. We'll have to move fast. If my father or the Krell are already here, we might only have one shot to alter the prototype. They navigated corridors with flickering overhead lights, occasionally ducking into alcoves to hide from patrolling guards. Signs in both Common Standard and the Rithari language indicated directions to research wings. At last, they reached a sealed door marked with the neural bridge symbol. Nalia used a code to open it, and they stepped into a stark white lab brimming with advanced machinery, neural scanners, medical pods, shimmering data cylinders. Standing at the central console was Elias Rithari himself, a tall, imposing figure with the same turquoise undertones in his skin as Nalia, though his eyes carried an intensity hardened by years of corporate power. Flanking him were 4 heavily armed guards, plus a scientist who was hurriedly transferring data onto a portable drive. Nalia froze, tension radiating from her. "Father," she said, her voice low. Elias turned, expression thunderous. "So it is true. You've come to sabotage everything." She squared her shoulders. "You've left me no choice. This device can't fall into Krell hands." One of the guards pointed a weapon at Orion. Elias lifted a hand, halting the guard. "Before we turn violent, let's clarify matters. Nalia, you know I never wanted the device used like this, but we are out of time. The Krell have threatened to destroy everything, to imprison me, to wipe out entire Rithari outposts if we don't deliver. They've already taken some of our family hostage." Nalia's features softened for a moment, though her resolve stayed firm. "There must be another way. We can't sell out the galaxy just to save ourselves." Elias's gaze flicked to Orion. "And who is this? A human soldier you've recruited?" "Commander Orion Black," Orion said, though he kept his stance guarded, ready for the fight that seemed inevitable. "I stand with your daughter, because she's right. Billions of lives could be enslaved if the Krell gained full control over the neural bridge." A pained expression crossed Elias's face. "I know, but what am I to do? Let them kill my family? We are but pawns in a greater game. The Krell Dominion is unstoppable if it sets its sights on us." Nalia took a step forward, ignoring the weapons aimed in her direction. "We can reprogram the prototype so it appears to function as the Krell want, but in truth it will only work as a healing device. That way, we fulfill their demand yet deny them the actual mind control function." Elias's eyes lit with a trace of hope, but then uncertainty. "Have you tested such a strategy?" Nalia shook her head. "Not fully, but we have to try." At that moment an alarm blared throughout the facility. Klaxons wailed, and overhead lights switched to an ominous red glow. A robotic voice announced, "Unregistered ships have entered orbit. Krell dropships detected." Elias cursed under his breath. "They're here sooner than expected." To his guards he snapped, "Prepare defensive positions." Then he turned to Nalia and Orion. "Go! We will hold them off as long as possible. If you can indeed alter the prototype, do it. The main console is there, but hurry." It was a tentative truce born of desperation. Elias seemed to realize he had no better solution, and if Nalia's plan worked, at least the device would not become a universal weapon. Orion and Nalia hurried across the lab, firing up a console linked to the swirling silver sphere that housed the neural bridge hardware. Lines of alien code flashed across the screens. The complexity was mind-boggling, referencing biological imprinting algorithms that Orion barely understood. Nalia typed rapidly, guiding Orion on which segments of code to isolate. Meanwhile, the thunder of footsteps and blaster fire echoed from the corridors beyond. Krell forces clashed with Rithari guards, energy weapons sizzling. Nalia's fingers shook. "We're running out of time," she muttered, scanning lines of code for the crucial override. The door to the lab slid open, revealing 3 towering Krell soldiers clad in black exosuits that bristled with weaponry. Their leader, a fierce figure with orange reptilian eyes, hissed, "You dare defy the Dominion?" Without waiting for a reply, they opened fire. Orion knocked Nalia to the floor, returning shots from behind a console. A barrage of sizzling bolts struck the lab equipment, sending sparks and shards of metal flying. Elias rushed in, sidearm blazing, trying to distract the Krell. He was joined by 1 remaining guard, the others presumably down. The scientist who had been working with Elias was nowhere to be seen, either fled or dead. In the chaos, Nalia frantically input the reprogramming code. Orion realized they needed a stable neural link to finalize the process, so he pulled out the portable version of the device they had used earlier. "We have to interface with the main system," he shouted over the din. She nodded, hooking the portable device into a console port. The system recognized the link, prompting them for user confirmation. Orion will have to share mental space again, this time bridging the code from our combined neural patterns to the prototype. He spared a glance at Elias, who was exchanging fire with the Krell. "Do it!" Orion yelled. I'll keep them off you. Nalia engaged the link. Orion felt a familiar hum in his mind as she guided him, forging the ephemeral mental connection that had partially healed his burn. Now it served a different function. They were channeling their dual perspective, human adaptability and Rethari biological synergy, into the prototype's fundamental programming. Splinters of code glowed on the console, each line a potential toggle between healing or domination. Together they initiated a forced rewrite. But the Krell leader spotted them. With a roar, he launched a specialized energy grenade that clattered across the lab floor. Ilias, seeing it, lunged forward, slamming his body onto the grenade. A deafening blast tore through the lab, enveloping Ilias in a flash of light. When the smoke cleared, he lay crumpled against a shattered console, grievously wounded. Nalia let out a cry of anguish, nearly breaking her mental link with Orion. He steadied her, their combined minds fighting to remain focused. The final lines of code scrolled past, culminating in a message. Reprogramming complete. The sphere pulsed with a gentle glow. They yanked out the portable device and severed their link, breathing in ragged unison. Moments later, the facility's automated defenses, possibly triggered by the system changes, activated in full. Turrets dropped from the ceiling, peppering the Krell intruders with suppressing fire. Overwhelmed, the Krell leader issued a guttural command into his communicator. They began a fighting retreat, gathering their wounded. The Dominion had no time to claim the device, especially if it no longer operated as intended. Orion rushed to Elias, who coughed weakly. Nalia knelt beside her father, tears in her eyes. "Why did you do that?" He gave a strained smile. "I might be a desperate man, but I won't stand by and watch you die. You're my daughter. I'm sorry for everything." She pressed her forehead to his. "Hold on. Orion can help." Orion quickly evaluated the injuries, injecting a coagulant and applying a medfoam to the shrapnel-ridden torso. He shook his head slightly. "We can stabilize him, but he needs more advanced care. Let's get him out of here." By the time they managed to carry Elias to a side corridor, the Krell ships were departing, likely to regroup and plan anew. The facility was in disarray. Rethari guards lay scattered, some still breathing, others unmoving. Nalia's sorrow was palpable, and Orion felt echoes of her grief through the residual neural link. As they emerged onto the surface, relief arrived in the form of an Alliance cruiser descending from the sky. Captain Stryker's voice crackled through the comm system, explaining that intelligence had tracked Orion's flight and responded with backup. Medics rushed in, taking Elias on a stretcher. Nalia clutched Orion's arm, trembling with exhaustion. He slid an arm around her shoulders, guiding her aboard the cruiser. The last thing he saw of Teneris was swirling sandstorms swallowing the hidden facility, now a graveyard of misguided ambition. 3 weeks later, Commander Orion Black stood in the main atrium of the Alliance Medical Headquarters on Earth, dressed in a crisp uniform. The atrium soared overhead, glass ceilings letting in natural sunlight, a sight rarely enjoyed on many frontier worlds. He watched as a shuttle docked, the seal opening to admit none other than Nalia Rethari. Though wearing a formal outfit, she still possessed the same quiet determination that had fueled their frantic battle on Teneris. Her father survived, though in critical condition for a while, and now was undergoing therapy. Nalia's role in preventing the catastrophe had earned her a measure of clemency, as well as cautious respect from the Alliance. She approached him with a small smile, setting down a sleek metallic case. "They told me this facility might help finalize the healing version of the neural bridge. I plan to share everything we've learned. No conditions." Orion returned her smile. "It'll save countless lives." They walked side by side through the bustling corridors, passing scientists and medics who paused to stare. Word had spread that a Rethari heiress had defected from a dangerous program, forging an unprecedented partnership with a human. Nalia stopped at a window overlooking a garden. The Earth sun bathed them in a warm glow. She faced Oriana. "I've decided to remain here for a while. There's so much research to do, and I want to ensure that technology can never again be twisted for mind control. That is, if you don't mind having me around." He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, remembering the night he first massaged her injured calf, a gesture so simple yet profoundly life-altering. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Her turquoise features radiated a faint luminescence, a subtle trait of her biology that he'd come to recognize as genuine happiness. "I can't help thinking about that day in the lounge. If you hadn't noticed my leg, then billions of people might have fallen victim to a monstrous weapon," he finished softly. "Or I'd still be blindly following orders without realizing the bigger picture." She nodded. Perhaps it was fate, or just good timing. They continued walking, discussing the details of their near future. New protocols would be written, ensuring cross-species collaboration for purely humanitarian ends. The fiasco with the Krell highlighted the need for vigilance against any empire or faction that sought technological domination. And through it all, Orion and Nalia found an anchor in each other, connected not just by circumstance but by a mutual bond, emotional and in some sense neural. Stories soon circulated about the bizarre chain of events that began with a trivial leg massage. Journalists plastered sensational headlines on interweb feeds. "Human gives alien girl a leg massage. You won't believe what happened next." Rumors abounded about cross-species romance, hush-hush infiltration, the lethal standoff on Teneris, and the rumored mind meld that defied all known medical science. Neither Oriana nor Nalia bothered to correct the details. The truth was already wild enough. They stood on a high balcony that overlooked Earth's luscious greenery, the air carrying the scent of blossoming trees, something that struck Nalia as impossibly beautiful after a lifetime in sterile starships and corporate enclaves. Orion inhaled deeply, recalling the freezing wastes of Ravoth 7 and the smoky corridors of Stellar Oasis. Now, he was here, safe, with a woman who had become more than just an asset or assignment. She was his partner in forging a better future. High Command, for its part, decided not to penalize Orion for stepping outside normal protocols. The reprogramming of the neural bridge was too valuable an outcome. Captain Stryker, in a rare moment of congratulation, even joked that they'd rename the project in honor of Orion's unique approach to field medicine. Orion simply flashed a wry smile, recalling that his approach had begun as nothing more than a helpful gesture, kneading away a stubborn muscle cramp. In the months that followed, the newly reconfigured device was tested in controlled trials, showing promise in aiding stroke victims and those suffering from degenerative neural diseases. The mind-control danger had been neutralized thanks to the locked code that required the presence of both human and Rethari neural signatures. Occasionally talk arose of the Krell seeking revenge, but with the Alliance now on high alert and the Rethari conglomerate realigning under more ethical leadership, thanks partly to Elias's remorse and Nalia's influence, there was a greater unity that served as a deterrent. Elias, recuperating in a specialized med ward, expressed quiet gratitude to Orion. Though father and daughter still had a long road to healing personal rifts, yet for Orion and Nalia the future shone with a promise as vast as the galaxy itself. Their bond, first tentative, then forged in the crucible of danger, was an unbreakable tether connecting two species, two lives, and two hearts. And in some unspoken corner of their minds, they both recognized the singular moment that had catalyzed everything. A simple act of compassion, a willingness to reach out, to heal. It had started with a leg massage delivered by a human who saw pain and responded, and it had ended in a shared conviction that all beings, no matter their origin, were worth fighting for.